Imagine discovering a body in an advanced state of decomposition, lying face down on top of a rocky hill known as the Devil's Teeth, surrounded by branches arranged in the shape of a cross, strangely stacked stones, and symbols that seem to have come straight out of a ritual. That's how, in September 1972, Jeannette DePalma's body was found by chance, after a dog brought home a human arm. From that moment on, a simple missing person case turned into one of the darkest mysteries in American criminal history. Jeannette, only 16 years old, had disappeared weeks earlier, and her absence was initially treated with indifference. But the scene where her body was discovered raised suspicions of something far more sinister. Who placed the objects around her? The location was known for strange stories and trails avoided even by the oldest resident. And the most disturbing question, was this a satanic sacrifice? In the 1970s, the United States was in the grip of moral panic, a period dominated by irrational fear of cults, occult practices, and satanic activity. The media fueled the paranoia, and any strange symbol became front-page news. Local newspapers quickly spread rumors about macabre rituals, burning crosses, and demonic practice in Springfield. But no concrete evidence was ever presented. Worse still, official documents mysteriously vanished. Photographic records disappeared. Key testimonies were ignored, and the police seemed more interested in closing the case than solving it. Over time, residents began to suspect that someone powerful was protecting a secret. The mafia? A cult? An influential figure in the town? No one knew for sure, but the missing evidence only deepened the fear. Decades have passed, and to this day, no one has been arrested, no theory has been confirmed, and the case remains open, but frozen in time. The site where Jeannette was found is still avoided, treated as cursed. This video will explore everything: who Jeannette was, what happened to her, why no one took responsibility, and what this story reveals about fear, silence, and the secrets a community can keep forever. Before her name made newspaper headlines and became the subject of conspiracy, Jeannette DePalma was just a teenager like many others. Born on August 3, 1956 in Jersey City, New Jersey, she grew up in a large, traditional Italian-American Catholic family. She was the sixth of 8 children, and her childhood was marked by strong family ties and a solid religious upbringing. The DePalma family moved to Springfield, a growing suburban town, where they bought a home in a newly developed residential. However, their presence bothered some longtime residents, who viewed the newcomers with suspicion, especially the DePalmas, who quickly became the target of gossip and speculation. Jeannette was a deeply religious girl. Although raised Catholic, she began attending an evangelical church, where she became actively involved in the local. She participated in community activities, helped people struggling with addiction, and was seen as a young woman devoted to her faith. At the same time, she had a strong, straightforward, and easygoing personality. She was fun, loved music, had friends, and in some ways defied the stereotype of the church girl. This duality made her admired by some, but misunderstood by others. Jeannette's public image didn't always match the versions spread around the neighborhood. At school, she struggled to fit in. There were rumors, always denied by her family, that she was promiscuous, attended parties, or behaved inappropriately. Some of these rumors stemmed simply from the fact that she was different. She didn't blindly follow social norms. She was confident and outspoken. In a conservative and paranoid community like 1970 Springfield, that alone was enough to draw harsh judgment. Her family wasn't spared from the town's sharp tongues either. Jeannette's father, Salvatore DePalma, was once accused of domestic violence, and persistent rumors claimed he had ties to the mafia, specifically the Cosa Nostra. None of these accusations were ever proven, but in a small town, whispers alone were enough to taint a family's reputation. And that certainly influenced how the authorities and the public perceived the case when Jeannette despite the challenges, those who knew her remember a young woman full of life, committed to her beliefs, and determined to help others. Many friends and church members describe her as someone who wanted to change the world, starting with the people around her. She genuinely cared for others, especially those on the margins: addicts, lost teenagers, people battling depression or abandonment. But that empathy may have put her in dangerous situations. Some believe that her compassion and desire to save others brought Jeannette close to troubled people, and that this may have been one of the reasons behind her disappearance and death. But none of that can be stated with certainty. What we do know is that Jeannette was more than just a victim. She was a young woman with dreams, faith, and a powerful desire to make a difference in a world that often judged her simply for being who she was. It was a Monday, August 7th, 1972. Jeannette DePalma had just turned 16 and left her house around 1:20 p.m. She told her mother she was going to hitch a ride to her cousin's house in Berkeley Heights, a relatively short trip, but she never arrived. That was the last time anyone in her family saw her alive. When 10 p.m. came and Jeannette still hadn't returned, her parents began to worry. At first, they thought she might have spent the night at her cousin's house. But when they called, they discovered she had never shown up. Without wasting time, they went to the police station to report her missing. The response they received was like a bucket of cold water. The police insisted they had to wait 24 hours, assuming the girl had run away or left of her own free will. That delay was one of the first major errors in the investigation. The time lost in those initial hours may have cost valuable evidence. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread. Some claimed Jeannette had run off with a secret boyfriend. Others said she was involved with drugs. Speculations based solely on old rumors and the prejudices the town already held against her and her family. Jeannette's mother, distrustful of the police response, began her own search. She put up posters, talked to friends, and walked through neighboring areas. But nothing. No concrete clues. No reliable witnesses. It was as if the disappearance had happened in thin air, leaving no trace. In the following weeks, the family's anguish only grew. The police began to take the case seriously only after public pressure and the involvement of local media. Even then, the investigation seemed to go in circles. No line of inquiry was pursued in depth. It was as if no one truly wanted to find Jeannette or understand what had happened to her. Then, 6 weeks later, a dog brought the answer no one expected. A piece of a human arm appeared on the porch of a house near the forest. The police were called, and on September 19th, 1972, the search led to the place where Jeannette DePalma's body was finally found, marking the beginning of an even darker chapter in the story. What turned Jeannette DePalma's case into a true urban legend wasn't just her disappearance, but the way her body was found. On September 19th, 1972, a dog that lived near a wooded area returned home carrying something horrifying in its mouth, a decomposing human arm. The shocked owner immediately alerted the police. The investigation led officers to a rocky hillside within the Watchung Reservation, a forest preserve on the outskirts of Springfield. At the top of the formation, known to locals as the Devil's Teeth, Jeannette's body was found lying face down, in an advanced state of decomposition. The location itself was already disturbing. Access was difficult, the trail poorly marked, and many residents avoided the area, known for stories of fear and strangeness. Well, the police found there wasn't just a body. Around it were stacked stones, logs arranged in a circle, and makeshift crosses made from branches. Some of these elements appeared to have been placed recently, suggesting intentionality. The first witnesses at the scene, including officers and reporters, described a heavy atmosphere as if they were in the presence of something supernatural. These details immediately fueled speculation about occult practices. In the 1970s, fear of satanic cults was widespread, and any strange symbol was seen as evidence of a ritual. Local newspapers didn't hesitate to use terms like sacrifice and witchcraft in their headlines. Jeannette's case was quickly linked to satanic rituals, even though no concrete evidence was presented at the time. There was something even more unsettling. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition inconsistent with the weather conditions. This raised suspicions that the corpse might have been kept elsewhere before being placed at the site. How did Jeannette end up on that isolated hilltop? Was she carried? Was she alive when she arrived? No one could say. Instead of offering answers, the crime scene only brought more questions. And as investigators struggled to understand what had really happened in that grim place, the community descended into panic, convinced that something sinister had occurred at the Devil's Teeth. After the body was discovered, the next step was to perform an autopsy. But the advanced decomposition made nearly all procedures difficult. The body was officially identified through dental records, as the facial features were unrecognized. The lack of well-preserved tissue made it impossible to perform a precise analysis of any injuries. resulting in a string of uncertainty that would never be resolved. There were no visible signs of violence on the body. No cuts, no apparent bruises. Even so, the medical examiner suggested the possibility of strangulation, a hypothesis based on the position of the body and inconclusive details found in the but without definitive evidence. It remained just that, a hypothesis. The absence of visible trauma also fueled theories that death may have occurred by suffocation, overdose, or even natural causes. Yet none of these possibilities were confirmed. The toxicology report, which could have helped clarify these doubts, was never conducted, or if it was, its results were never made public. This kind of omission only added to the suspicion surrounding the case. There were no signs of sexual abuse. The analysis of Jeannette's underwear revealed only hairs consistent with her own, no foreign DNA, no suspicious fibers. It was as if everything had been deliberately erased. Another detail that drew attention was the weather. The time between Jeannette's disappearance and the discovery of her body was just over 6 weeks. However, the medical examiners noted that decomposition was far too advanced for the season, which had been relatively mild. This led to a disturbing theory. Jeannette's body may have been stored elsewhere before being placed at the Devil's. This possibility, though never confirmed, would explain how her body ended up in such an inaccessible spot, with no drag marks or recent trails leading to the site. But it also raised another question. If someone brought her body there, why? To stage a ritual? To hide a conventional murder behind the smokescreen of a supposed cult? The autopsy, which should have provided answers, only deepened the mystery. With every medical detail undermined by the body's degradation and the lack of solid information, the case of Jeannette DePalma turned even darker, a death without explanation and, at that point, without justice. With no concrete answers from police or forensic experts, public imagination took over the case of Jeannette DePalma. The wooden crosses, braided branches, isolated location, and state of the body created the perfect setting for speculation. The most talked-about theory? A satanic ritual. At the time, the United States was in the midst of the satanic panic, a wave of collective hysteria that sought demonic cults around every corner. Springfield, a relatively quiet town, became part of this map of fear. Local newspapers reported that ritualistic signs had been found around the body. Some residents claimed to have seen crosses, pentagrams drawn on the ground, even remains of sacrifice. These reports, however, were never officially confirmed. Curiously, the photos taken at the scene vanished from police archives, fueling even more distrust. What was the police hiding? Why were these images never released? Donald Schwar, a retired police officer who worked the case, completely rejects the idea of Satanism. According to him, the symbols at the scene were wildly misinterpreted, influenced by the paranoia. Schwar says the location was a known hangout spot for teenagers, and the objects found could have been left there during parties or tasteless pranks. He believes drugs were involved and that Jeannette's death may have been accidental. This theory, however, has its critics. A private investigator named Edward Solono, who spent years on the case, strongly disagrees. He doesn't believe in overdose or drug involvement. According to Solono, Jeannette was murdered by someone she knew. He says she trusted people too easily and may have become involved with someone dangerous, possibly during her community outreach. In addition, some theories connect Jeannette's death to secret cults allegedly active in the region. There are those who claim that the site where her body was found had been used by occult groups for decades. Residents reported hearing strange chants and seeing nighttime activity in the woods, though none of these claims were formally investigated by police. Others believe that the ritual scene was staged after her death, specifically to deflect attention from the true cause. A kind of smokescreen. Instead of a straightforward homicide, a ritualistic spectacle meant to confuse investigators and manipulate public opinion. After all, the stranger the scene, the harder it becomes to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the town was divided. On one side, those who firmly believed in the satanic cult theory. On the other, those who saw it as a dangerous distraction preventing the real perpetrator from being held accountable. And caught in the middle of it all, a devastated family and an investigation seemingly lost in a maze of fear, silence, and misinformation. By that point, the case of Jeannette was no longer just about her. It was about the fear of a generation, the dangers of collective hysteria, and the holes left by a flawed investigation. The mystery grew, and with it, the sense that the truth was being hidden, not by occult forces, but by very real people. As the theory of a satanic ritual dominated the headline, other equally dark possibilities began to gain traction, and they all revolved around one common thread: a cover-up. Something in the case of Jeannette DePalma seemed deliberately erased, as if someone had a direct interest in keeping the truth buried with the body. The first evidence of this came with the disappearance of important case documents. Forensic reports, photographic records of the scene, and even witness statements simply vanished from police files. When some of these documents resurfaced years later, they were incomplete and, curiously, none of them contained visual proof of the supposed ritualistic symbols found at the site. This raised an inevitable question. Did these elements really exist? Or were they fabricated by rumors and the media? Furthermore, several witnesses claimed that the local police refused to comment on the progress of the investigation. Some reporters even publicly denounced the lack of access to case data. Residents began to suspect there was more behind that silence. What if it wasn't just a poorly investigated case, but an active attempt to protect someone? Conspiracy theorists point to the possibility that an influential figure in the town was involved, someone powerful enough to manipulate the investigation, make evidence disappear, and ensure that no one was held accountable. This theory is reinforced by reports suggesting Jeannette may have discovered something dangerous before she vanished. Perhaps she witnessed a crime, or worse, became unintentionally involved in something that put her life at risk. Others linked Jeannette's death to the past of her father, Salvatore DePalma. Old rumors claimed he had ties to the mafia, and that his reputation for domestic violence was only the tip of the iceberg. Some people suggest Jeannette's death may have been a way to silence the or a message in the midst of a larger conflict. There's also a subtler, but equally disturbing theory that the police simply didn't want to solve the case. Not out of a direct conspiracy, but due to sheer prejudice. Jeannette's image had been tainted by gossip. It was easier to believe she got involved with drugs or the wrong crowd than to admit that a religious young woman might have been the victim of a brutal and unsolved crime. And as if that weren't enough, the atmosphere surrounding the town continued to fuel the mystery. A testimony that emerged years later, for instance, claimed that Jeannette had been seen hitchhiking at night, days after her official disappearance. This completely contradicted the police version and called the entire official timeline into question. The lack of answers turned the case into fertile ground for all kinds of theories. Some plausible, others exaggerated, but all driven by the same feeling that something was hidden. It wasn't just the crime that remained unsolved. It was the whole truth that seemed to have been buried with Jeannette, in a place where the light of justice never reached. In the end, every missing piece of the investigation seemed intentional. And the more time passed, the harder it became to separate fact from fiction, truth from paranoia. The case of Jeannette DePalma came to be studied not only as an unsolved murder, but as a clear example of how a society can create its own ghosts and protect them with silence. Decades have passed since Jeannette DePalma's death, but the shadow of the case still looms over Springfield. The place where her body was found, the Devil's Teeth, remains shrouded in mystery, avoided by locals, rarely mentioned in official records, and practically absent from school curricula. The lingering fear has become part of the city's cultural fabric, a kind of unresolved collective trauma. In the years following the crime, new accounts surfaced that only deepened the atmosphere of uncertainty. Some people claimed to hear whispers, see shadows, or feel strange presences when approaching the woods. Others believed the site had become cursed, a point of negative energy linked to something far greater than an isolated crime. Supernatural theories, though impossible to prove, became part of the mythology surrounding Jeannette, turning her story into an urban legend. Amateurs and independent investigators try to draw connections to other similar cases in the region. A frequently cited example is that of Marianne Pryor and Lorraine Kelly, two teenagers found dead under strange circumstances in New Jersey in 1974. Like Jeannette, they vanished without a trace and were found in remote areas. Although police never established a direct link, the parallels are clear. Young girls, wooded regions, and no suspects. Some theorists propose that a serial killer was operating in the area at the time. The name of Richard Cottingham, known as the Torso Killer, was even mentioned. However, Cottingham's methods didn't match the DePalma case, and that theory was ultimately dismissed, at least officially. Others still believe that Jeannette was the victim of an actual cult operating secretly. A frequently mentioned detail is the presence of a cross made from braided sticks, something unusual according to experts in occult symbolism, indicative of ritualistic intent. But how can that be proven without photos, without evidence, without a proper investigation? Perhaps the most chilling notion is that Jeannette knew something. Maybe she witnessed something forbidden. Maybe she trusted the wrong person. Maybe, in the end, she wasn't the victim of supernatural forces, but of secrets far too human and far too dangerous to be revealed. Jeannette's sister, Cindy, spent years trying to reopen the case. She knocked on doors, sent letters, pressured authorities. In return, she got silence. A heavy silence that echoes to this day. In the end, Jeannette DePalma's tragedy went beyond the boundaries of a crime. It became a symbol of systemic failure, the power of fear, and the way a story can be shaped not just by facts, but by what is omitted. The forest where it all happened is still there, but what it hides may never be revealed. And as time goes by, the case remains an open wound, a constant reminder that behind every unsolved mystery, there's a real victim, a grieving family, and a truth that, somewhere, is still waiting to be told. This was another mystery from the Secret Room. If you want more dark stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.